Thanks for joining us on The Human Side of Animal Care, a podcast where we share stories and insight from people dedicated to helping animals. My name is Callista, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm your host. We cover a range of topics in veterinary medicine, animal welfare, wildlife rehabilitation, and more. As a heads up, this episode contains explicit language and discussion of sensitive topics in animal and human medical ethics.
My name is Alex, and I am a registered veterinary technician.
When did you first know you wanted to work with animals, or what draws you to this field?
I've always wanted to work with animals ever since I was as a kid. Growing up, I only knew of one job working with animals, and that was to be a veterinarian. So for a very long time, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I went to school for it and realized that was not what I wanted to do. And then I bounced around for a while, and now here I am. But I've always wanted to work with animals in some fashion.
You said that you had only known about one job. How did you start finding out about other jobs when it comes to working with animals?
Probably in college is when I started, which seems really late, about learning about different types of jobs, like learning that you could work with wildlife, or that you could work at zoos, or that you could be a photographer, or literally there are so many other jobs other than being in the medical field or being a veterinarian that you could be. And I really enjoyed when I was in high school, I worked with exotic animals and I really enjoyed wildlife. So in college, I kind of explored that a little bit more. But it's funny how you end up back to where you started. I wanted to be a vet, didn't want to be a vet. Now I'm an RVT. So, yeah.
Cool. So an RVT, how did you become that?
So, I've been in the field since 2016. So it's oh my God, it's like 9 years now. But I became an RVT recently. I know it seems weird, but I did the PLAT program. So I wanted to there's a program at Pierce that's a 2-year associate's program, but I just didn't. I work night schedules. It's hard to do school. Also, on top of that, I was making enough money to be able to afford to do school at the same time, especially for 2 years. I had taken a couple classes before, some RBT classes at Pierce, but ultimately it just didn't work with my finances or my schedule. So I did an alternate route. I did PLAT, which is a 6-month program for people who have experience in the field. It's an accelerated program, and while anyone can do it, it's strongly recommended for people who've already been in the field for years because it's intense. So it's like a class a month. And it rushes you to prepare for the national exam. So it's really hard. So there's a lot of people who do the PLAT program because I think it's an easy way to get their RVT and get pay raise. That's what we're all looking for. But it can be really intense. And if you don't know anything, like if you're brand new to the field, it's really difficult. But if you already know what you're doing, or you've already been in the field and you know a lot of the stuff, then it's fairly easy because it should just be a refresher course. But yeah, I did the PLAT program in 6 months to get my school hours because I had all the experience hours. And yeah, and then I passed the test and got my RVT.
You mentioned that the pay is not great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you don't mind sharing, like, what an average unregistered vet tech in California, like hourly pay might look like, and then like how much does it go up by once you become an RVT?
So it depends on where you work and what you do. I won't tell you my current wages, but I can let you know that after 6 or 7 years of working at my previous hospital, and having a lot of experience in working overnights, I topped out at $23. That's it. And they told me flat out that I was at the high end and that they wouldn't be able to pay me any more, and that was it. If I had gotten my RBT while I was still there, they said that they would maybe give me $1, and there's no overnight differential. So that hence I switched hospitals. From a lot of my friends who have been in the field, I've found that the way to kind of increase your pay is a lot of them have bounced from hospital to hospital, where they'll work at one hospital, gain the experience, and then when they can no longer get a raise there for whatever reason, they go to another hospital that offers them more money. They get more experience at that hospital. Sometimes they come back, get more money. It just depends on where you are. California, from what I've learned, has the highest paid veterinary technicians in the country, outside I think maybe like New York, where there's high populations of people and cities and higher costs of living. Places like Nevada, who I have a friend who goes back and forth between there, a lot of RVTs top out at $18-20 an hour. Cost of living is a lot less out there though, but it depends on where you are. RVTs usually make more, usually by a couple bucks, but also depending on experience. If you are a specialty technician, you do make more money. So places like Access Specialty Hospital, they do offer more money for RVTs and even more money for like VTSs, veterinary technician specialists. So if you're like emergency critical care or internal med, that does require extra schooling and you do specialize in something. And I've heard of some places offering up to $45 for those specialty technicians.
It sounds like a lot of people don't really go into this field for the money.
No.
But what made you decide to stay in the field?
I surprisingly I genuinely enjoy the medicine of it. I didn't think I would per se, but I enjoy the emergency part of it. I enjoy working the animals and I surprisingly enjoy the math, all the medical calculations. And I don't mind working with clients. I have a background in like teaching after school and educating people. And I enjoyed that. So a lot of my job has to do with talking to clients and educating as well as working with animals, figured out. And it's a kind of combination of things I enjoy. And despite it being a really stressful, difficult job, sometimes I do get a satisfaction of like, knowing I did the best that I could, seeing animals recuperate and get better, and then being able to continuously learn more. There's so many species, there's so many different things to learn. There's always something new, and it's never dull for me.
What made you interested in emergency? I know you talked about starting out with wildlife, and I know you mentioned doing some work with exotics and stuff like that, but what was kind of your path to emergency?
So I used to work in an exotic animal rescue. Originally, my passion was to be a zookeeper. That was after I learned I didn't want to be a vet, I was like, well, I'll be a zookeeper, which also is another job, doesn't pay that much. And I couldn't get any jobs in any zoos. It's extremely competitive, especially for AZA accredited. Oftentimes you have to know someone like with veterinary schools to get in, or also AZA accredited zoos will not take anyone who has not previously worked at an AZA accredited zoo, which is kind of like a catch-22. I was fortunate that when I was in high school, I volunteered for one that was AZA accredited. So I had that, but still it was super competitive. So I had that for my high school, but not enough experience to work at places like San Diego or anything like that. San Diego is the highest paid one, which tops out last at like is like $25. Yeah. Yeah. Some of them are like, if you're like a senior keeper, I think it's increased now like 30, something like that. But it really doesn't pay. Like being a zookeeper is another one of those labors of love where you're not going to be making $50 an hour. You get to work with a lot of cool animals, like you be the carnivore keeper, or you're working with, all the large carnivores, primate keeper, bird keeper. I know a bunch of people who work at zoos and they love their job, but they definitely are not like making all the money. So I worked at an exotic animal rescue that doubled as an after school program. And I had some not so great experiences there. And I had a dream a long time ago to have my own exotic animal rescue. But I learned very quickly from working at this place that I could not open my own animal rescue without having the medical knowledge of how to take care of these animals. The place I worked at treated a lot of their animals as just like there was no medicine, if any. It was not very well run. And I watched a lot of animals, pass away from some not great circumstances. So I decided I needed to get the experience. So I jumped into the medical field, started working at a hospital during the day as a GP.
For those who don't know, GP stands for general practice or general practice veterinarian. So it's basically like the equivalent to your human primary care doctor.
I lasted 6 months. It was boring. It was so boring. Yeah, so 6 months was ears, rears, and vaccines. Pretty much, I gave vaccines, I cleaned ears, and I did anal glands. Occasionally, they might teach you a couple things, but at the first opportunity to do something different, I jumped at it. They needed an overnight person. And from what I was told, on overnights, they teach you a lot more because there's less people. And oftentimes with the skeleton crew, they just need you to be able to do stuff. So they train you on everything ASAP. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn faster, and I wanted to be actually of use. So I joined the overnight crew, and it was a crash course in everything. I was very fortunate to have worked at a hospital in its golden age with a lot of people with a lot of experience who also were willing to teach, which can be hard to find in a lot of hospitals because there can be hospitals that are really cliquey that are like, no, you stay in your lane. I'm going to do everything because for whatever reason they consider knowledge to be like only certain people can have it. I don't know. I was fortunate, and so I learned a lot. And ever since then, I've been an overnight person for like the past 8 years.
Overnights, they seem difficult. How do you manage your schedule with doing overnight shifts?
It's rough, but I've been doing it for so long. It's so weird to be up during the day. I used to not have, well, I still don't really have much of a life, but I had less of a life. I spent all my weekends just basically being up all night and sleep during the day. That's really depressing. So, I've kind of worked on a new schedule where my day, like my recovery day, so I get off on like Thursday morning. I'll stay awake all Thursday and then try to go to bed at night. And then I'll be ideally have kind of like a pseudo daytime schedule for Friday and Saturday. And then I usually on Saturday nights like stay up all night or do something and sleep all day on Sunday to try and get back into the schedule. It's not easy, but for my mental health, I need to have a life outside, like during the day at some point.
Speaking of having balance, what do you like to do outside of work?
Uh, I go on walks with Bill. I crochet.
By the way, Bill is Alex's dog, and she is a very cute chihuahua.
I'm big into reading. I have a lot of books. I'm pretty much a grandma, really. I enjoy my rent. I have my own apartment, and it is the best thing in the world after having so many roommates. And then I bake, nothing terribly exciting. I don't go on as many adventures as I used to, but I think it's because I don't have roommates, so I'm not trying to stay out of the house as much.
What would you say, over the years with your experience, what would you say is the hardest part and the best part of your job?
A lot of the time, hardest part is surprisingly is not euthanasia for me. I don't know how to put this in appropriate words. It's kind of it would be dealing with situations that you have no control over, at which point an animal is suffering. So I understand there's a lot of different beliefs and different religions and things like that, and there are many people who don't believe in things like euthanasia. I think the hardest part for me is to watch an animal who I know is not going to survive, who I know is suffering from something terminal. It's gotten to the point where I've been in the field long enough where you can look at an animal and be like, that one's got maybe an hour left. Or like, we don't do something in 15 minutes, it's going to go. And I've seen things, die horribly. And that's the hardest part, knowing that, could have prevented that as much as, it's hard to make that decision to, let a family member go. Because in human world, it's illegal. Dr. Kevorkian.
So, Dr. Jack Kevorkian was a pathologist in human medicine. He practiced in Detroit, Michigan in the 70s and was in support of physician-assisted suicide, also known as medical aid in dying. In 1997, a Supreme Court ruling determined that it was not unconstitutional for state laws to make physician-assisted suicide illegal. But the ruling did not necessarily criminalize physician-assisted suicide across the nation, so it's up to the individual state to decide whether it's legal or not. In 1999, Kevorkian was convicted of second-degree murder in Michigan, and today physician-assisted suicide is still a highly debated topic in human medical ethics.
And then on top of that, too, an owner wants to keep going or doesn't believe in euthanasia. And then obviously, when the animal passes away, they get upset. Had owners get very angry and upset and blame the staff for not doing more, for not explaining things, or for simply just not believing that their animal was dying and that we killed their animal, even though it died on its own. Those are the hardest parts. It's a tragedy, and sometimes people go through it and it's very emotional. But the hardest part for me is watch the animals. You have the option to make sure that they're not in pain, and you know that they are, and there's nothing you can do to fix it. That's the hardest part for me. And it happens inevitably. I try to console myself with, even at the end, at least, they're no longer suffering one way or the other. But outside of that, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the best part of the job is when things survive. Because I've run into a lot of patients where I was like, or well, not a lot, but like several patients where like, oh, this one looks like it's not going to make it. And lo and behold, they cross that threshold and get better. I've seen several parvo cases where I thought that they were going to die. I was watching them like, I swear I thought they were going to take their last breaths. And then they just kept breathing. And they made it. And then I saw them again later and they survived. Oh, and then we had that hit by car dog that made it. Were you around for Cupcake?
No.
She was a homeless man's dog. She got hit by a car by a drunk driver while she was walking next to her owner, and she got rocked. Like the car was going probably 20, 30 miles an hour. We didn't think she was going to survive. She came in, he was carrying, basically, the guy was running in traffic, trying to get someone to pull over so that he could get someone to drive him to the hospital. Someone ended up calling the cops saying some guy was running in the street, and they knew him. They picked him up. They brought him and his dog to the hospital. It's one of those times where it's like, I'm really glad that I work with the team that I have, because the team that I was working with at that point, we saw this dog come in. I went up to do the triage, and she was unable to walk. She was still, conscious, but she wasn't doing well. And so we brought her back, and also the owner was a little scary. He was beside himself, but he looked like he was one step away from losing his shit. But thankfully there was a cop there. He almost didn't let me take his dog, but we brought the dog back, and she had pulmonary contusions. She had a hemorrhagabdomen. She had spinal trauma. She wasn't able to walk. And then she had a traumatic brain injury. I don't know who else listened to this, but she had blood in her abdomen. She had bruising all over inside of her chest, pulmonary contusions. The spinal trauma was when we put her down, she could not feel or move her legs. And she had, I believe, anisocoria, which means she's got two different sized pupils. So she had some kind of head trauma. So I remember that night. I remember we had her on the table. She was just laying there. She was just breathing. And this apparently is a dog that's normally like a caution, doesn't like anyone touching her. And she's just letting people touch her. And we all looked at each other, and we were like, we have to make a decision. We either tell this guy, who obviously has no dollars to his name, he has no money, we do all of this stuff for free, and that we just accept that we're going to do like thousands of dollars worth of treatments for free, or we give him his dog back and tell him to leave. Because I work with a great team, we all looked at each other and we just did what we could. We took x-rays. We didn't run any blood because that was probably something we couldn't get away with. Placed an IV catheter. We gave hypertonic saline for the trauma. We gave her boluses of fluid because her blood pressure was really low. And we just gave her pain meds, of course, and some time. All of this was at least $2,500 worth of care that we knew we were not going to make. This guy was not going to pay us. And ultimately, because of the damage that she had, we used this to kind of buy time to be like, look, if you can't afford to take care of this dog, needs to be hospitalized and needs a lot of care. She's got a lot of injuries. We recommended euthanasia because of the extent of her injuries. This man, this was his service animal. He was not ready to let her go. And he was not in any mental state to be able to handle that kind of situation. Like I said, he looked like he was half a step away from absolutely losing it. So we did what we could. I think we had that dog for maybe about like an hour and a half, give or take. And we gave all that stuff, and we were trying to keep her on fluids, tried to convince for euthanasia. And he decided to take her. He said, give me my dog back. And because we do not hold animals for ransom, that's not signed. I'm pretty sure that's illegal. You cannot keep an animal and force them to pay. He decided to take his animal back. He was convinced that the hospital down the street was going to treat his animal for free and that they were going to help him. And we were like, we know them. I don't think they wouldn't even let him in the door. They did not even look at the dog. They looked at him and the cop, and when they said he had no money, they said you cannot come in. So he ended up walking that dog to the beach, and he sat with that dog all night in his lap, waiting for her to die. And for a long time, we didn't know what happened to her until our receptionist was driving down the street in Santa Barbara one day, and he sees that damn dog walking down the street. He sees that dog and he like freaks out. He pulls over and he's like, "Oh my God, Cupcake!" And the guy looks at him. He's like, "Yeah." And so he sits down and chats with him. And apparently, yeah, the guy took her to the beach to her favorite place and said, if she's going to die, she's going to die in her favorite place. And he waited and he waited and she just kept breathing and she kept breathing. And then she got up. So she still had a little bit of a limp, but she recovered. So her hemoabdomen must have clotted. She must not have had any major rupture. Her pulmonary contusions were probably still there, but they healed. They must not have gotten so bad that, she couldn't breathe. Her spinal trauma, she didn't break anything, but she definitely had like spinal shock. And with time, you can recover from that. And we gave her hypertonic saline, which must have been enough. And yeah, she got up, walked around, came up, said hi, super friendly, was still alive. And the crazy thing is that after that cop left, they actually called animal control. If that guy had shown up at any hospital in the Santa Barbara area, they were going to take it from him and they were going to euthanize her because both AVS and our hospital were like, the damages were so great, you should euthanize her. So if he had walked into their hospital, she would have been euthanized because animal control was like, this is cool. It was recommended by professionals. Oh, she lived. I think she had youth on her side. She was like a 2-year-old pitty. So it wasn't like she was some 13-year-old dog. He eventually, from what I heard, ended up surrendering that dog to the shelter after all that, like a year or so later. And she has now been adopted by a family and is hanging out with like little kids. And she does really, her personality apparently has completely changed from being living on the street to now living in a home with a family. She's no longer like aggressive or scary, which she used to be. And yeah, there's like a picture of her with like a 5-year-old girl. So it's stories like that where like when you swear you think something's gonna die, you're like, oh, and you hope. And now every time I see an animal like Cupcake, I'm like, it could be another cupcake, just hard, but like it could be a cupcake.
Right. Wish it happens more often, but yeah,
I
that's
know it's rare. Cupcake was like a 1 in a million type thing, but sometimes it's nice when you're like, oh my God, she lived, and we were able to save her. I think if we weren't able to give her any of those treatments, I think she would have had a far harder time. Maybe she would have still made it, but I think it would have been a lot harder without pain meds or without meds for her brain swelling and the boluses of fluids because her blood pressure was unreadable when she came in. It was so low. So she definitely needed help.
What is something you wish the general public knew about the veterinary or animal care fields, or just something you wanted to share about the field? Something you feel like maybe someone who's not in the field wouldn't know and is important for them to know?
That we're human too. That nothing's perfect. It's just like any other job. Obviously, it's not playing with puppies and kittens all day. The job can be very, very difficult, but mostly it's just that we are human and that our job isn't just kind of like, oh, fun. It can get very scary very quick. And just to remember that even if you don't know exactly what's going on, we are doing our best to try and help you. We don't have control over prices and how much things cost. And that no one ever likes talking about the money in vet med or in anything like that. But we do our best to help as many animals as we can. But it is also still a business. The people who work at these hospitals also still deserve to get paid. They do just still deserve to pay their bills. Animal hospitals, unfortunately, most of them are not charities. And so we're not here to try and steal all your money. We don't make enough money, especially individually. If you're curious about who makes all of the money in most hospitals, look to the management or the owners of the major corporations. But we do our best to try and help as many as we can. And if you're nice, we can work with you. There is an asshole tax. I promise you, if you walk in and you start screaming and swearing at people or, being an asshole, there's an asshole tax. I will not bend over backwards to help someone. I will help their animal. I will not let their animal die or hurt or suffer. But if you are abusive or violent towards the staff, I will not bend over to try and make you happy. You have to treat the staff with dignity and respect. We're doing what we can with the best of what we got.
Do you have any advice for someone who's interested in getting into the animal field?
I mostly is if you're interested in the field, try it out. Especially when you're working directly with animals, experience is always necessary. And you're never going to know what you want to do until you actually go out there and do it. So if you're interested in being in the vet field and you want to be a technician, find a hospital, and you have to start at the bottom of the totem pole. If you can't handle picking up poop or, taking direction from supervisors, if you're someone who struggles with like authority figures, hospitals have to work as a team. They do have managers. You do have to do the shitty jobs. Pardon my French, but you do have to pick up the poop and, the unfun things before you get to things that you might consider cooler, like placing IV catheters or central lines, sampling lines, x-rays, things like that. But you'll learn very quick when you start working in this field because you'll see a lot of stuff, even as an assistant. You won't just be, picking up poop. If you're working in an emergency hospital, you will see animal codes. If you're working in any hospital, chances are you will see euthanasias. You'll see a lot of things, unless you're working at some kind of vaccine clinic where all you're doing is just getting vaccines. You're going to see a lot of blood. You might see horrific wounds. You're also going to have to learn how to work with people you don't agree with. You're also going to have to learn how to accept that other people have their pets. You cannot just take their pets away if you don't agree with them. Everyone has different ideas of how to do stuff, and unless it's actual, reportable abuse, if someone wants to treat their cancer patient with CBD oil and that's it, that's all you can do. If someone insists that a raw diet is the only diet they're going to give their dog, no matter what, you can agree to disagree, but you do have to learn. It's another one of the hardest part is, having to, something is not great, is, really you don't agree with, but ultimately it's not your pet. And that the hardest part is, just kind of letting that go. You cannot just stand there and argue with people. You cannot refuse to give them back their patients. You cannot yell at them. Everyone is entitled to their own beliefs and what they want to do. So yeah, ultimately jump in the field, get experience, especially with exotics. You're never going to know what you're afraid of until you do it. So like holding rats. Yeah, or reptiles. A lot of people don't know that how they're going to handle snakes. When I was 14, I handled my first snake, and I didn't know how I was going to take it. I was like, this is a snake. I've never held a snake before. And it was a northern water snake, and those snakes are known to be assholes. Not venomous snake. And I held it, and I was like, all right, I like this. I can do that. Now we have snakes. Yeah, just jump in. And then you'll very quickly learn if this is the field for you and what you can handle and what you can't handle. And then always ask for help. That's another thing. Please ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There is no such thing as a stupid question, because I'd ultimately rather you ask and learn than to try and do it and figure it out on your own and mess it up.
You mentioned snakes. What drew you to that area initially?
As a kid, I mean, I got it from my father. Always huge fan of dragons. So I always read books about dragons. But I didn't actually start working with reptiles until I started my work at the Museum of Science in Boston, where I worked at the Animal Care Center. And there's a lot of exotics there. And reptiles are the most common program animals because they're just really easy to work with. A lot of times people have worked with them so much that they just kind of hang out there. It's great for kids. They can touch them. And also, a lot of times too, I find them personally the most fascinating. I can't tell you specifically what got me into reptiles, but I remember working with them in high school. And then when I got to college, I took a herpetology class and a comparative anatomy class. My herpetology professor was interesting guy, little cuckoo, has a lot of reptiles. But I just find it fascinating because there's just so many different species that are so niche to different environments, and they have such cool anatomy that adapts them specifically to a specific purpose. And then you can also learn their genetic codes and so for snakes, what's really cool about them is they obviously long ago far away they used to have legs, but there's actually a gene that codes for ribs. And so instead of legs, there's a gene that codes for all the ribs that they have. And so that's why they have all the, because as Jesus says, instead of making like 6 ribs, we're gonna make a lot of ribs. And then a lot of the like old world snakes, so these guys, it's a red-tailed boa and a ball python. They have like little vestigial hind limbs, and they also have pelvic bones. So you can also, it's really cool to kind of see their anatomy and how they evolve and learn the different ways of why they work, how they adapted that way. Turtles are also really cool too, because they live in a box, so they've had to adapt to living inside of a box, which means like their chest, they don't have a chest that expands. Their shoulder blades are also inside of their rib cage. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to learn to adapt to living in an immovable box, and they've been around for millions of years. Clearly it works. So they're also just really cute.
It sounds like there's not a whole lot of vets or clinics out there specific to exotics. Is that just mostly because of money, or just there aren't as many vets that are interested?
So it's weird. I think surprisingly there's not a lot of money in exotics. While a lot of people have those pets, very few people are willing to spend like for reasons, say French bulldogs, people come in and be like, I already spent $3,000 on this animal, I'm not going to spend more. Or on the opposite end, it's parents who bought their kids some $20 hamster, and they're like, why am I going to drop $500 on this hamster? It's a hamster, I'll just go buy another one. And it's the same with a lot of reptiles. Sometimes they're really cheap to buy, and their enclosures are really expensive, and they just don't want to spend medically anything on them. And then 2, a lot of it is there's not a lot of people who know, like, it's, from what I understand, it used to be a competitive field to work with exotics, because everyone wants to work with bears and tigers and all that stuff. There's definitely like there's a horse niche and a cat niche and a dog people niche. There's very much a large carnivore niche, or like a reptile niche of people like specific to that who want to do specifically that for whatever reason. And it can be really competitive, but like I said, there's not a lot of money, because the people who own these animals are usually rescues. Rarely they're really wealthy people who just happen to have a lot of exotic pets, but they're not, very few of them are willing to put a whole lot of money into them when they could just get another one. And I think it's also true, it's difficult to do exotics. There's also a lot of phobias. A lot of people don't like snakes. A lot of people don't like lizards. A lot of people don't like birds. Or there's also invertebrates. You can also treat invertebrates. So it can be hard, especially when you have a specific niche that you want to do, and you don't really want to do anything else. But there's not a lot of money in it, despite it being highly competitive. And then I think people realize that when there's not a lot of money in it, there's also research is still coming out. We still don't know a lot about like pain management in reptiles. We're learning more about rabbits because more people are getting rabbits. So we're getting more and more effective at treating things like GI stasis or foreign bodies, things like that, or guinea pigs who can also get bloat, like they have GDVs as well. So we're still learning. And so I feel like at least in my experience, a lot of the stuff in treating exotic animals, while we know a lot of stuff, a lot of it's also experimental, just trying to see what works. And so that can make it a little hard. It's fascinating, it's difficult.
This has been the human side of animal care. Thanks for listening.